Hi, this is Maria Nodoff with the Orangevale History Project. I'm here with Ken Benedict, our videographer. It is January 28th, 2023, and we are here at the Orangevale Grange to interview Bob Clouse. Bob, in what year were you born?
1942.
And how did you come to be in Orangevale?
In approximately 1973, I worked for Grange Insurance in Seattle, Washington. And I was living in Yakima, Washington, I was working as a marketing rep for Central Washington for Grange Insurance Association. And the boss came to me one day and said, "Would you consider moving to California?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, we need you in California, and we feel you're the only person that can bail us out in the problem we have." And I said, "I'm sorry, I haven't even finished what you sent me to Yakima to do." And I said, "I really don't believe I want to move just yet." Well, after turning him down 4 years in a row, it was in 1973, I finally decided if I ever wanted to go up and make any further advancements with the company, I should probably go to California. So I walked into his office one day and I said to him, "Fred, I'm going to get your job." And he almost swallowed the cigar he was smoking. And I said, "Oh, don't worry, by the time I get your job, you're going to be the executive vice president. You're going to have Dwayne's job. But in order to get your job, I need Russ's job. And in order to get Russ's job, I'm ready to go to California if you still want me." And he just looked at me and shook his head and he said, "I have never had anybody speak to me like that." He said, "How soon can you go?" And I said, "Well, how soon do you want me?" And this was I think in February of that year, and of 74. And he said, "Can you be ready by after Memorial Day?" And I said, "Well, if that's what you want." So I got on a plane and I met him at the airport, at the Seattle SeaTac airport in May after Memorial Day, and came to California for the first time. And he came down with me. And on the way down on the plane, they were going through a bunch of numbers with me to tell him. He tried to explain why they were in such an emergency to get me here. And so on first week in August of 74, my furniture was in a moving van moving to Sacramento, California. And I bought my first house in Fair Oaks. And so I became quite familiar. I was the marketing rep for the entire state of California. And after 5 years of traveling the state of California, and we did, for the first time in the history of the company at that time, we did turn a profit the first year I was here and reduced the loss ratio considerably. And so they thought I was going to stay on forever. But after 5 years of traveling the state, I just had it. And the doctor said I was a prime candidate for a heart attack. And I'd been involved in a bad wreck on Highway 80. And so I just decided it was time to do something. And in 1978, I went to Seattle to meet with my boss. And for some reason, I had my letter of resignation typed with me. I didn't realize I was going to use it. And So I asked Russ, I said, did you get the letter I sent you in August? And he said, yes, I did. Because I went up every year in November because I go up elk hunting every year and on I own property in Washington, and I go up to that property to elk hunt. And so on my way up, I stopped at the office, and this is when we had our conversation, and I said, you asked me to predict the next 10 years, and that's hard to do, but I predicted 5. And I sent you that letter in August. What do you think? And he said, well, I think it looks good, but you're about 5 years ahead of yourself. And I said, well, you asked me to project 10 years, and I gave you 5 years. And he said, probably everything you say in that letter will be done, but we're not going to do it right away. And I said, well, then I guess, Russ, it's time for this. And I handed him my letter of resignation. And he read it. And he pushed himself away from his desk. He had an office on what we called Mahogany Row. All of the vice presidents and president and everybody was on there. And he turned and looked out the window, and then he looked at me and he said, what do I have to do to talk you out of this? I said, you can't talk me out of it. My mind is now made up. And so he said, I'll double your salary if you stay. And I said, Russ, you know you can't do that. Besides, it's not money that's causing me to do this. I have to feel good about me. And my kids have been in 4 different school systems now because I moved with the company. I want them to finish high school in Fair Oaks. And then after that, I figured the next spot was back in Seattle. But I just didn't want to stay that long. And I was tired of middle management. You know, that's where you get the people below you are always chewing on you. The people above you are always sticking their nose in your business and telling you to do something different than you're trying to do. And it was a no-win situation being in middle management. And so he said to me, what are you going to do when you go home? And I said, well, if I don't get killed, because my wife don't even know you and I are having this conversation, and she don't know I brought my letter of resignation. So if I don't get killed, I'll go looking for a job. I guess I don't know what I'm going to do. I go back to driving truck. I used to drive truck, and I can drive truck again. I'll go to work for some farmer. I shoveled a lot of manure in my lifetime working for farmers, and so I think I'm capable of working on a farm. And there's a lot of farmers down there that need help. So I really don't know what I'm going to do. And so I came home and told my wife what I had done, and she said, well, you've never let us down yet. She said, you've always brought home money, you've always put groceries on the table, and always paid the house bills, so I think you'll do good. And I had given, this is in November, and I had given them till January 1st to find my replacement, because I was leaving at the end of December. And so one day I thought, I'm going to go out to Orangevale and see J.R. Rogers. And he was our agent at that time for Grange Insurance in Orangevale. And he had called, he said he was getting ready to hang it up. He called himself a cantankerous old bastard. He was just too old to make changes like the company wants. He didn't even like writing homeowner policies because he thought he should write a fire policy and a liability policy and a theft policy instead of a homeowner, combining all those coverages into one. So he was quite old-fashioned, and so I said to him when I saw him, I said, every time I'd pull into the parking lot, and he was down here by the Black Stallion in the Windmill Shopping Center, they called it. And every time I pulled up and looked in the window of his office, he was always sitting there with his feet on the desk. He'd see me coming across the parking lot, and he'd get his feet off the desk and act like he was busy. So I walked in to talk to him, and I said, after we got all the pleasantries out of the way, and I said, JR, are you serious about selling your business? I said, every time I come out here, you're frustrated about something, and you always keep saying you're going to sell out. Well, if you sell your business, I would like to consider buying it. And he said, what do you want to do that for? You're my boss. And I said, I'm not your boss. I'm just a marketing rep that comes around every once in a while to give you a kick in the butt to get you to go sell something. And I said, number one, I said, I want my kids to graduate from high school here in this area. One of my kids was going to Will Rogers, and the other were in grade school, and I had 4 children. And so anyway, I said, I want my kids to graduate from school here. And if I stay with the company, I would have to probably move back to Seattle, and they'd be in a whole new school district. So I said, I quit. I quit Grange Insurance. But I didn't tell him when it was to become effective or anything. But I said, I'd really like to buy your business if you're going to sell it. So he said, well, you've certainly given me something to think about. He called me 2 days later, and he said, Bob, Mama and I have been talking it over, and we'd be proud as punch if you'd buy our business.
What year was that?
January 1978. Well, this was in December 1977 that we're having this conversation. And he said to me, I said, well, that's great, JR. I said, when do you want to make it effective? Now remember, I said I had never told him a date. And he said, well, why don't I work till December 31st, and then I give you the keys on December 31st, and January 1, you take over. I said, it's important that I keep the same office, the same phone number where all these people have been coming to you for years. I want to keep that same phone number. And he said, how about you just take over the keys? I'd give you the keys and you take over January 1. And that's exactly what I'd told my boss I was going to do with them. I was going to work till December 31st, and then he had to find my replacement for January 1 because I would no longer be with them. So it worked out beautiful that I bought this business in Orangevale. And my idea was, at that time, because I was his marketing rep, I was the one who kept trying to push him to do something different to sell the product. And I knew if I worked his accounts, I was going to increase my volume within the first year. The company was going to finance me for up to 5 years if I wanted a loan for that long. And because they would pay JR 1 times his annual production for the business and then sell that same book to me. So I thought, okay, if I double his business, if I get out and work his business like it should have been worked, I can double my business in 5 years. And I'll have a free business. That was my stupid thinking at that. But you know, you have to play games with yourself sometimes when you're going in debt and out of a job and the whole thing. And so I doubled the volume in 1 year. So everything is profit. Well, and then within the 5 years, I doubled that number again here in Orangevale in that same office. And so I had an office on Greenback Lane in Orangevale for 40 years when I sold the business to my son. And I started where the Black Stallion is, or was. Then I moved right around the corner to where Howard's Meats was in that office, or in that building. He owned that complex. And there had been an attorney in the office I was renting at that time. Then I moved.
Just a second, Bob. So you moved around the corner. What was the street?
Greenback Lane.
Okay.
Let's see. The Black Stallion is now the Golden Dragon restaurant, or no, it was the Golden Dragon. Now it's a Mexican restaurant. Right. In fact, my back door of that was my front door of the other office. So I moved. There was Howard's Meats had the long piece of property. Then the attorney had, in the front office, which I think is a tattoo parlor now, was Ted Barnes had a real estate office there. That was 3 separate buildings. And so then I had been there. Howard sold the property, and he sold the business the butcher business to a guy named Carl. Became Carl's Meats, but he sold the buildings to a guy by the name of Jim Guernsey. Well, Jim Guernsey and Carl didn't like each other, and so they got into a squabble, which caused me I was right in the middle of it. I was trying to buy it. Jim said, "I'll sell it to you, Bob, but I won't sell it to Carl." Well, Howard had made such a deal with Carl that he said, I'll give you a first right of refusal. So every time I'd make an offer to Jim to buy the complex, Carl would booger me up. Wouldn't let me have it. So I just said, heck with it. So I moved down to Chestnut and Greenback, in the building down there. And when the landlord on that building, what would not fix things up was some guy from the Bay Area. And he wouldn't do things that needed to be done. And one day the fire department had to be called to what was our power room. And kids could just break into that room any time they wanted to. And the fire department's the one that basically said I should really start looking because this place is going to burn down one day. And so then when they built they removed the old house that used to sit there at 9341 Greenback. It's now where the O'Connor's Meats, or O'Connor's Barbecue, and the chamber was in there for years. And anyway, my office, I moved into that when it was built. The landlord contacted me and said, "I want you in our complex." He says, "I've researched you," and he said, "I want you as an anchor." So my first office there was where was it Orangevale Press or Orangevale Copy Center? That was my first office there at that complex. And then I moved down into building A or B by where the chamber used to be in that complex, because I didn't need that big square footage that I had. So the landlord said, "Well, I haven't even finished this one out down here." He said, "I'll finish it to your specs. What do you want done?" Oh, okay. So I picked the I picked the carpet colors, and he did it by my specs until I retired. Then when I retired in 40 years, so that'd be, 18? And sold the business to my son, Mitch. who then moved the business out to Roseville, and now he has moved the business to Spokane, Washington, because he's inherited part of my dad's family farm or he didn't inherit it, he bought some from the estate. And us, the kids, my brothers and my sister, inherited ours, but our grandkids had to buy theirs. And I'm very proud of the fact, and so is Mitch, that the entire farm got broke up into 40-acre parcels, and now it's one of my dad's heirs who owns every acre of that farm. And in fact, Mitch has already broken the ground to start building, and he started to build his house on the farm up there. So Bob Clouse Insurance moved out of Orangevale in 18, and after 40 years, went to Roseville for a few years, and now to Spokane, Washington. And he's running Bob Clouse Insurance basically from my old family farm, which pleases me. I'm glad it's him, not me. I couldn't do it, because when I speak to him now, he's still got 3 feet of snow on the ground. And I enjoy looking at the sunshine and rather do that and it be cold than shoveling snow. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's the story of my life in Orangevale. And there were times, in fact, I had one of our old-time Grangers stop in my office one night about 7 o'clock while I was there on Greenback, up there by the Black Stallion. And he walked in and he said, "You must be my new agent." I said, "Yes." "Were you insured with J.R. Rogers?" "I sure was." And he said, "I can tell already I like you." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, you own the business and you're still here working and it's 7 o'clock. He said, "You don't go home at 5 o'clock, huh?" I said, "Well, when there's something to do, I got to do it." "You're right, I don't have anybody else to do it." He said, "Well, I own my own business and he smelled like he'd just been dumped on by diesel oil. He just, and he said, "My name is W.D. Terry and I own Terry Construction. And yes, I get down underneath the equipment and fix it myself." He said, "And see all this? I had to get down under one of my dozers and work on it. And I got leaked on by diesel." And he said, "But I kind of like you already because you're here still working." And that was my first association with W.D. Terry, who ultimately became very qualified. I really enjoyed him. He would tell me his stories. In fact, I even gave you I gave his wife and son's Vaughn Terry to the history people to contact. And Vaughn Terry, I think, is still living here in Orangevale. W.D. and his wife used to live down on Polly Avenue, right off of, why can't I think of that street right now?
Isn't that off of Hazel?
Right off, well, no, south. It's right off of,
Chestnut?
no, the next one on
Filbert?
No, Filbert, the other way. There's a park, Pecan. Pecan, and he had lived at Polly and Pecan Avenue. And he did all the groundwork. WD was, he got tired of picking cotton in Oklahoma. I think it was Oklahoma or Arkansas, one of the two, and he came out west and he bought a donut shop. He had a 4th grade education, couldn't read or write, had a 4th grade education, And he bought this donut shop, and he built it up. And he said, I sold it for too much money. Because I should have sold it on payments. I thought I was just smart because I took 50% down and the rest, and he said, hell, by the time I got through paying taxes, and so he took the rest of it, and he bought 4 more donut shops. He figured if he could make money selling one, he bought 4 more. Well, then he really made money, and he sold that one, and he bought a backhoe. And he started running backhoe around until the cops showed up one day and told him he was operating without a license. And he said, Bob, I couldn't take the test. You'd let me run that tractor, I'll show you what I can do. And so the cops were gonna take him to jail. And he said, fine, take me to jail, I don't care. You have to feed my kids and my family while I'm in jail. And ultimately, he said they allowed his wife, because they realized they were talking to a genius in his work. And by then, he was building subdivisions, doing all the underground in a subdivision, laying them out and doing all the sewer and water and that kind of stuff. And he had Terry Construction by then, and they decided they would let his wife read him the question and then he would answer before she'd even give him the multiple choice question possibilities. So she'd mark the answer that he had just said, and he passed his contractor's license that way. And he said, then I was able, once I got my license, he said they left me alone. And he said, I built the business up. He bought some of that first land out off of White Rock Road, where Costco is out there, and moved his business over there, lived here in Orangevale. And then he went up to Lake County and bought an old sawmill that was going broke when the spotted owl became pretty popular and they were fighting the sawmills. And he bought a sawmill, and then he cut firewood and split it. And so he sold firewood all over the area. And then he bought a bunch of land that had manzanita brush. He cut the manzanita, and he was still running his construction company. And he cut that manzanita into blocks and convinced Safeway to buy a bunch of it to sell for barbecue. Everything that man did, he could sell donuts and make money. He could sell manzanita and make money. He could sell firewood and make money. And he made a lot of money building subdivisions. And when he got sick there at the last, and we had a restaurant up here where Denny's is now. I forget the name of the restaurant. Came from the South, and he knew that restaurant from the South. And it was one of those, you could eat buffet breakfast there all day long. But at a certain time of day, they quit doing the buffet, because it was, in the evening time they did dinners, but it wasn't buffet dinners. Anyway, I would call him and I'd say, hey, I want to take you to lunch. Where do you want to go? Well, that was a dumb question because I knew where he wanted to go. I'd have to get Rolaids later, but I'd go there and have his southern fried stuff, And finally one day he said to me, he said, Bob, I just want to say thank you. I said, what do you mean? And he said, you know, you think you have a lot of friends. But when you get, like I am, kind of not bedridden, but housebound, you can really tell who your friends are. He said, and you're one of my 5 friends. He said, you know, from the first day I met you in your office, he said, I knew you had some quality to you. And he said, but you actually call me and you come see me. And you actually take me to lunch once in a while. And he said, there's only 5 of my friends that do that. The rest of them who called themselves friends, they've never even called me since I've been sick. And that meant a lot to me that he would take the time to bring that to my attention, you know, because I just did it because he was one of us in Orangevale, you know, and one of the old timers here.
Was that restaurant called Shoney's?
I believe it was. They had one up in Auburn as well, and they finally had to close up Shoney's because they could only serve their product and they couldn't send a truck from wherever the hell they came from out here to California for only 2 restaurants. I think it was Shoney's, yeah. But, you know, I had like there was WD, and the guy I bought my business from, J.R. Rogers. There was a whole bunch of those initial people here in this area, you know, that, and I asked J.R. one time, what's your name? I thought it was Junior or something. J.R. Yes, WD. What's your real name? WD. Well, I guess that's what their parents named them back then. I don't know. But when I think of Orangevale and the people that I've dealt with over the years, because I saw people at their best and I saw people at their worst being an insurance agent. You know, I helped put one of my own clients in jail for stealing his own motorhome. You know, and I thought something was phony when because he'd had a boat stolen, he'd had other things stolen, and I was on his side. He was my client. I was on his side and helping him out. Well, then his motorhome got stolen, and his own nephew turned him in. His own nephew had gone to work for the highway patrol, and he couldn't figure out why Uncle John was parking his motorhome in a barn in Georgetown for the winter in September. That's the time you want to use it. And it had been an old Greyhound bus converted at that time to a motorhome. Very nice. And so he went to work the next day and just for the hell of it, put the license number in the CHP system and called his mom and said, Mom, Uncle John's motorhome is hot. And so when they called me about the motorhome, and I told them what I knew, then I got a phone call from some unknown person who never did identify themselves, but it turned out to be his ex-wife, was calling me to let me know about the boat that had been stolen and where they would find it. And this guy had worked at the SP Railroad for years out here, and he was in partnership on the boats and the motorhome and everything on the theft of that with another one of my clients, who at that time was the exalted ruler of the Roseville Elks Lodge, and I had demitted my membership from Yakima to Roseville, and then I couldn't even walk. I couldn't even look that guy in the eye anymore. And so I converted to Carmichael Elks. So I would still be an elk, but, you know, and I wanted so bad to let people know that this guy's a crook. But they found out themselves.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. When you bought the business from JR, did you immediately called it Bob Clouse Insurance?
Yes, I changed it to Bob Clouse Insurance. Then the insurance department, I had to change it to Bob Clouse Insurance Services, because I was not the insurance company. You know, that's how they look at that, so.
My second question is, WD, you said he started donut shops. Were any of them in Orangevale?
As I understood it, it was in Carmichael.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure where his 4 other ones were, but he was the Donut King. And then after he got his license, all that chain link, he started Golden State Fence Company first. And he built all the cyclone fencing along the freeway when they were building Highway 50. And then after he got that business built up, by then he was already working on underground stuff, and so he just couldn't keep the fence. So what he ultimately did, he convinced his son Vaughn to buy an auger, a truck-mounted drill, and he then started building fences. But by then, WD had sold Golden State Fence, and it's still in operation over in Rancho Cordova.
And you believe that Vaughn is still in Orangevale?
Yes, he used to be up here on Orangevale Avenue.
Okay, we'll see if we can find him.
And I have called the last phone numbers I've had for him. In fact, I had my son check to see if he's still insured with Bob Clouse Insurance, and he was. And so I've left several messages at that number, but he's never called me back.
So I know you're involved with the Grange, and I want to get into that, have you talk about that. Were there any other community organizations in Orangevale that you were involved in?
I had been, when I was in Fair Oaks, I'm involved in Orangevale Chamber, was involved in Fair Oaks Chamber. I was the president of the Boy Scouts committee for where my kids were. I have the Silver Bear Award for that. And I had been involved in Fair Oaks Grange when I came down, and then we consolidated with Fair Oaks because we found that, you know, when the Granges were built in the early 40s, and in fact this one was in 1910. Orangevale Grange was built was organized in 1910, and then this property here was bought and built on in the 50s, like 1952, I believe. Anyway, these towns were far apart. You know, for somebody in Fair Oaks to come out to Orangevale for a meeting was quite a drive. Well, now it's 10 minutes. You know, so we're competing for the same people for membership. There's only so many people that will join a group like us because I like to call us a community service organization with roots in agriculture. And that's why I was so pleased when we got the garden started, because now we have, like we had the Rose Society here, giving the people lessons on how to prune roses. There's going to be we'll do canning sessions when they grow too much stuff down there. And so As far as other organizations, no, other than the chamber because I just felt that I volunteer way too much time to the Grange.
Would you talk about the Grange then?
I'd love to talk about the Grange. I joined the Grange when I lived in Washington, and I'm a 62-year member of the Grange right now, going on 63. And prior to even being able to join the Grange, I had been a junior Grange member when I joined that when I was 5 years old. And so I've been they won't let us count those junior Grange membership towards continuous Grange membership. So I guess you could say I've been involved in the Grange all my life. Because I remember before I was even old enough to join the junior Grange, going to Grange meetings with my parents and falling asleep in the coat room where they hung all their coats. There was a bed in there, and us kids would go up there and lay down and go to sleep, and they'd have to pack us home and sleep. But, so it's been a lifetime thing. And I really devoted my time to it because I believe I call us a motherhood and apple pie organization. And we have our roots in agriculture, we also have our filing with the IRS is that we also have legislative ability. In other words, I, as a member of the grassroots, America, can come up with an idea. If I can convince the majority of my members that my idea is a valid one, and they vote on it, and the majority of the Orangevale members vote on it and agree, then the master of Orangevale Grange will take it to the California State Grange session, of which Orangevale will have 2 votes at the State Grange session. And if I can convince the majority of the people at the state convention that my idea was a good resolution, and here it is, then if they support it, if it's a local thing, in other words, if it's a statewide thing, then we have lobbyists here in Sacramento who will carry that legislation. If it's something that goes on to national Grange, then the state Grange will take that resolution to national Grange and fight for us. And if they agree with it, then we have 2 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. who will take it to the Hill and take it to somebody to try to get a law passed. Now, just this month, at our last meeting in January, we just adopted a resolution here in Orangevale, and we're starting that process with what is it called? When somebody's not been married, but they call themselves husband or wife, common law. I did not realize California is not a common law state. Well, one of our members' husband just recently passed away, and she's fighting quite a battle right now because they never got married. And that's been 50 years ago. And California does not qualify for common laws. So she may have to move out of the house that she's lived in for 50-some years and move away and do something different because she may not get that property. And so we just adopted a resolution. There are 20-some states that do apparently have common laws. California is not one of them. So we just adopted a resolution with her help to get California law to consider common law marriages. Never even anticipated. I thought California already was. I had a secretary that didn't marry. They didn't get married they lived together. She thought after 11 years they were considered married. but they're not. So we're going to take that on right now, and that will become a state thing, not a national, because all we care about is California. So, example, when my office was by the Black Stallion, I witnessed 2 fatalities there on Greenback Lane. And both of them motorcycle accidents. This guy was turning into the tire shop there on Greenback, and a motorcycle embedded right in the side of his car. The guy was doing about 100 miles an hour on the motorcycle, and of course I saw him fly over the vehicle and land on the pavement. And unfortunately, I was the first one out there, and some guy stopped and said, "I'm a doctor, I'll take over." Well, the guy was dead before they got into Mercy San Juan. And then another one right at Walnut. And so I tried to get the businesses on Greenback Lane involved to get at least a left turn lane on, because that's when left turn lanes were just starting. And I never will forget, Sacramento County, the guy in charge of our roads and highways at that time, his name was Dusty Rhodes. And his comment was, there hadn't been enough fatalities. Well, the office next to me was a barber shop at that time. And there was a beautician in there operating out of the barber shop. And I think her youngest client was probably 65 or 70. So all of their husbands would show up to pick them up after they get their hair, and they look nice, and pull out of that parking lot to make a left turn. I saw more cars have to screech to a halt to keep from hitting these old guys pulling out and making a left turn and go down, because they didn't just gun it and just slowly start to go away. And so we were unsuccessful, we business community. So I came to Orangevale Grange one night, and I had belonged to Fair Oaks at the time, and I said, Orangevale, and they had about 700 members here at that time. I said, we need your help. The business community needs your help. I helped them draft a resolution for a left turn lane. And all I was really concerned about was from Chestnut to Main. I didn't care about the rest of Greenback. Well, they adopted a resolution, hand carried that to their supervisors and to the Department of Transportation in Sacramento County. Within months, we had a left turn lane in Greenback Lane, because the Board of Supervisors said if the Grange adopted it and there's 700 people in the Grange want it, then there's more than just the business community. And that got the movement started. But it went, I didn't know it was going to go all the way from Sunrise to down here, but that's okay. So I believe Orangevale Grange was the push that pushed that left turn lane in Greenback Lane. The Grange, through our legislating process, helped build Folsom Dam. The Grange helped the construction of Shasta Dam, because we believe in the conservation of surface waters. And we had strong legislators at that time who were very into it and working in the Grange. I have had legislators call me and say, our assembly people, Tim Leslie, for example, when I was in Fair Oaks, he'd call me and say, Bob, you got any legislation that Fair Oaks Grange wants me to carry? Because they love it when we pass legislation, when we adopt a policy. They love it because I can assure you, when I bring something to the Grange meeting, it gets both negative reviews as well as positive. When we then take it up to the county and discuss it, it gets negative as well as positive. When we kick it up to the state, it gets negative and positive. And so even George Bush, in his inaugural address one year, gave the Grange credit because he said, we love working on Grange policy because we know it's been massaged from the grassroots clear to the top before it ever gets here. That was quite a compliment to us. And so that's where I like potlucks and I like coming to meetings and I like that, but I really like the legislative. We do not support candidates. We only support issues. So if Joe Blow comes and said, would you donate to my campaign? We say, nope, we don't do that. But if he comes and asks us, does the Grange have policy on this issue? Yes, we'll look it up and we'll see, and we'll show him. And so, because when I was state master, I had worked my way up, and I was master of the state of California, State Grange, for 4 years. And then I was on the board of directors at the National Grange for 8 years. And I'd go to Washington, D.C. 5 times a year for meetings. And we were at a state convention one day, and we had a congressman come speak to us. And he told us, on the average bill that comes to them at that time, the average bill they only heard from 12 people, 12 of their constituents. And I said at that time to the Grange people that were at the convention, I certainly hope 11 of those 12 are Grange members. And so for that reason, my assemblyman, Tim Leslie, hears from me on about a monthly basis. And when he doesn't respond to me in the way I think he should, then I send a copy of that. Now I send it to the 6 Congress people right around Sacramento. Garamendi, what's the Japanese gal? Her husband used to be there, now she's there. Anyway.
Doris Matsui.
Matsui. I send Garamendi, Matsui, not only Amibera, but also
Sue Frost.
Well, no, I'm having coffee with Sue Frost next Monday on another issue because I need her help on something else. And so, yes, I let them all know, and I let them know whether I like the legislation. I let them know. And if I don't like what they did, I let them know. I used to write Dianne Feinstein a lot when she first was there. Then I realized somebody else was hijacking everything and I wasn't hearing from her at all. You know, and then she got so just phony letters that I would get back. The first few I got, I still think, and I keep a lot of that stuff in my file at home, I think were her signature by herself.
How long have you been president of the Orangevale Grange?
For 2 years now. I was just elected for the 3rd year. I was master or president here one other term after we consolidated from Fair Oaks. So I guess I can say now this will be my 6th year.
I didn't realize there was a junior Grange.
Yes, there's a junior Grange, and that's basically for kids 5 to 14. And now we've started a youth fair program, and I was instrumental in doing that in the 70s so that our young people can raise animals. If we have a youth fair program, and we're just now starting to structure one here in Orangevale to compete with the 4-H and FFA at county fairs. And I was on Sacramento County Fair Board for 8 years. And in their handbook now, for participants, it has 4-H, FFA, independent, and Grange youth. So our kids are treated the same as 4-H and FFA at all county fairs now. And we got that passed through the fairs and expeditions in the state of California. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that while we started that here in California, and when I was president of California from 93 to 97, I tried to get the National Grange to adopt our California program. But we had leadership at that time who he thought we were competing too much with the 4-H and FFA at the fairs. Well, the only reason we organized the county Grange Youth Fair program was because the 4-H program started taking minority. If your county was 10% minority, you had to have 10% minority in your 4-H, or they cut off the funding. Well, Amador County, at that time, only had one black family in the entire county. Every 4-H club went to them, whether it was sheep, dogs, whatever, every 4-H club, and those kids didn't want to be any part of any 4-H. So the county cut away the funding, so that's where we started 3 junior Granges up in the Ione-Jackson area, just because those 4-H kids couldn't be 4-H club members anymore because there were no 4-H. So now those kids moved into the junior Grange program. And luckily here in Sacramento County, our 4-H has not been quite that severe, but we're starting to hear things now like we heard in Amador County a few years ago. So they're coming to us, there are 4-H kids coming to us, 4-H leaders, and saying, can we start a youth group here? Because they see it in other areas. So you're going to hear more and more as that time goes on. And I'm also very proud of Orangevale Grange. We were the first Grange under my administration to start our Words for Thirds program in the state of California, the entire state. And so I've had a hand in the Words for Thirds for all third graders all across the U.S., not just California now. And I've had a hand in the youth fair program. Now Nevada they've started a group of Granges up there now so they can have the youth fair program. Wyoming, Illinois, Washington, a lot of the state Granges now are doing, and they followed our program. And we started it right here in California and got it first and start. So yes, I'm very pleased, and that's the kind of stuff I like to do rather than, I'll come to the potlucks and I'll get involved in, like right now we're getting involved with the Orangevale Women's Club on Bunko a couple of times a year, and that's going to be fun, but that's a different reason. So I like to get involved politically. In fact, I was asked to run for supervisor, but I didn't want to do it. I don't know if the name Henry Clouse means anything to you from Elk Grove. He was on the board of directors, or board of supervisors, for about 18 years. And he approached me one day and he said, Bob, will you consider running for the supervisors? I said, no way. I started a business, got a business to run, and I want to run that. I don't want to be a politician at this point. And he said, All you gotta do is say yes, and you will be elected, I guarantee it. And I said, Henry, I appreciate you, and you and I are really good friends, and let's do it that way. I don't want to be a politician at this point. And he said, yeah, you do, you do. And I said, Henry, do you know George Dupre? Yeah, I know George. He was on the Fair Oaks Park Board for 16 years. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, I know him, but he said, I wouldn't support him like I could support you. If you tell me you're going to support him, I'll do it. I said, well, I will. I'm going to work with George and try and get him elected. Well, okay, I'll help you a little bit, but I'm not like if it was you. Well, for dollars raised, George got more votes than Jim Strang did for the first time. But we just needed to get rid of Bill Byron at that time, who was our supervisor. And, but Henry wanted me on the board. And he said, you're one of a kind, Bob. I need you on the board of directors with us. So that was, often wonder what would have happened if I'd have done that, but I just didn't want to go that far. I wanted to do my own business. And I'm glad I did. I think I had a more fruitful life than doing the politicking thing. But I think the Grange is whatever you want it to be. If you join the Grange, if you want to join the Grange because you got a garden spot you can use out here, more power to you. If you want to be a Grange member because you love the potlucks, more power to you. I don't default anybody. And I found that people would join the Grange to square dance. I know they did because I've seen them. People would join the Grange to play softball. I started a softball league in Spokane when I was the youth director. And people would join just to throw a softball. And you could come you could come as a guest to our square dancing, but 2 times. Then the 3rd time you better fill out an application to join someplace. Well, people would join to play square dance. I saw it, and I caused it to happen because we weren't going to give our program totally away, you know. So you would think enough of us to come to all of our functions, join us. And we're non-sectarian, we're not political, and we're non-religious. There's nothing in our race, color, creed, national origin that affects anybody. Now, the only 2 groups, the Jehovah's Witness, because we salute the flag at every meeting, and they don't do that. And then I had a next door neighbor who wanted to join the Grange when I lived in Yakima, because he saw what my kids were learning in the junior Grange, and he wanted his kids to be able to join the junior Grange. But he talked to his minister. He belonged to a Dutch Christian Reformed church. And the minister said, no, you can't, they salute the flag and you can't do that. You can't answer to 2 masters. And right now you're answering to us. Oh, okay. So those are the only 2 religions that I'm aware of that had a problem. We had in Fair Oaks, we had Jewish people, we had black people, we had anybody who wanted to join. And the thing that pleases me right now, the kid that got the giant pumpkin, won the giant pumpkin contest, he's a member of this Grange. His whole family is, and they're from India. And their whole family is going to be Grange members before much longer. They're bringing them in again. So, but they're a family organization. We're a family organization, and they appreciate that. Because at any of our functions that we operate as a Grange, you'll never see an alcoholic beverage served. Now, we can rent the hall to somebody who does, if they have wine or whatever, but it won't be a Grange function that brings wine and beer. So,
Well, this was really, really interesting. Thank you. You've shed a light on a lot of business in Orangevale and on the workings of the Grange, so we really appreciate it.
I'll be glad to sit down anytime. As you can tell, I get wound up about the Grange because I've been around it so long. I gave my dad his 65-year membership when I was state master. My granddad was a 50-year member of the Spring Hill Grange. My dad, 3 of my uncles, and now I belong, because I'm a 50-year member, I can say I'm a member because I belong to that Grange as well as this Grange. And so each Grange gets to claim me as a 50-year member. But I've actually been a member 63. And technically, after I've had my membership 50 years, I don't have to pay dues anymore. But I do. I still pay my dues because Orangevale still has to pay the state dues on me anyway, so why not pay my dues? It costs me a lot more than that to belong to the Grange because I volunteer too much.
Well, you've left a wonderful legacy. Keep going.
Well, it's kind of like here on this Grange, and I guess this Grange, I don't know if have you been to the garden?
No.
Well, to get to our garden, we go right around the building here and go through a gate and down. We had a bridge across the creek. Well, we find out this is not a creek. This is nothing more than a storm runoff water. This ditch that goes here drains everything from the Folsom city limits and south of Greenback and a little ways south of Madison into right here. Goes right through there. Well, we could never figure out why there's a wet spot. And Dale kept saying, well, it's that lady up there with their swimming pool. Well, I had Blackberry Dave, the tractor guy, was doing some work here one day, and I had him down there, and he said, Bob, come up here. Do you know you got a drain off the street, a street drain here? No, we don't. Well, guess what? There's 5 catch basins on Pershing Avenue that drain into the storm drain and right across our parking lot, right across our spot down there. Well, that explains that wet spot out there. So Dave started digging around with his backhoe, and the inlet is buried in 3 feet of debris. You'd never know it was there. So what we had to do, and I saw the guys out here with the stormwater guys, and I said, can you tell me anything about these storm drains? It appears we got a storm drain coming right across our property. And he pulled out his maps. He said, well, yeah, you do. There's 5 catch basins on Pershing. I said, what are you guys going to do about it? Nothing, it's on your property. So I went down I had to get a permit from the county. We then had, what did we do? I had to put a culvert in under our road, and I learned on something like, never call it a road, because when you say a road to anybody at the county, they automatically think of asphalt and concrete and gravel and all that. And I said, no, we're not gonna gravel that road. We're not gonna asphalt that road. That's just going out to our garden spot only. So I'm gonna call it a garden trail, okay? Well, so they wouldn't tell me how much the permit was gonna cost. So I was gonna get Sue Frost involved. And she gave me hell later because I didn't. But I actually had to take a drawing, I had to take pictures of everything, and I had to prove to them where the culvert goes across the road was lower than where it drains onto our property. Well, I didn't survey it, but I did some surveying when I was younger. So I figured, okay, it's about 8 feet drop in 150 feet down to here. So I took all of those measurements and I took them, and then to try, because right during COVID, you couldn't even talk to somebody from the county. Leave a message and we'll call you back. Well, I'm one of these guys, my insurance business trained me this. If I make a call to you, I'm gonna make a note. Spoke to your name at and what time. So I show up downtown at the courthouse one day, and I said, and I took my folder with me, and the security people's desk, at a desk in the hallway stopped me and said, "Excuse me, sir, do you have an appointment?" I said, "No, I can't even get anybody to call me back to make an appointment." "Well, you gotta have an appointment to be here, to see it." I said, "You get me somebody out here I can talk to that can make me an appointment, and I'll be glad to make that appointment." And I pulled out, I said, "See here, here's 9 phone calls I've made to this office and the dates. And not one person has ever called me back, and all I'm trying to do is set an appointment." She said, "Just a minute, sir." And as she walked around me, she said, "Damn it, these people are gonna have to start returning phone calls. That's security." Mm-hmm. Well, some young gal comes out, she goes and gets to somebody, and she says to me, "Well, do you have an appointment?" I said, "Ma'am, I'm gonna give you the same story I gave her earlier." I said, "See this list? Here's 8 phone calls I've made to this office, and I've been put on hold and said to call, that I left my number to please call back. Here's the the date and the time." And about that time, a couple of guys come out, some guy then said, because he cornered me, "And what do you need?" So I said, "I'm just trying to get a permit. They tell me I have to have a permit, but I can't get a permit. I can't get any work done until you guys give me a permit. I don't know what the hell for, but you got to give me a permit. You caused the problem, now I got to fix it. You ran the water across our property." And pretty soon he turned, he's looking over my head and he said, "Jim, you need to talk to this guy right now." Well, so I turn around and this guy said, "He's the boss of the water department. There's the top guy." I said, "Oh, okay." So I show him my folder and I said, "Where do you want me to start? Except I'm here to get a permit, and I've left messages this many times for somebody to call me to make a permit. Can't even get anybody to call me." So I told him and I said, "Here's the pictures of what I want to do." He hands me his card and he said, "You'll have a phone call within 2 days, I guarantee it." Okay. So he hands me his card. Now I've got all these other cards stapled in my file. He knows I've been working on this. And so he gives me his card. Well, I get a phone call in 2 days, and the guy said, "Well, can I meet you out there?" I said, "Yeah." So he shows up. And I said, "What's the permit gonna cost me?" He said, "I don't know, maybe 15 grand. I said, "Better not. I didn't want to involve Sue Frost in this yet, but if you tell me I'm gonna pay $15,000 to get a permit, then I'm gonna proceed as though, ignorance is bliss. And so I showed him my measurements and everything. Finally he said, this permit's not gonna cost you anything. He said, it's an 8-foot drop in 150 feet to go across here. Ain't no way you can hurt anybody back behind you. I said, hell no, if this plugs up, that whole basin's gonna be full of water, and then it'll be Lake Orangevale rather than what it is. So, no, I can't hurt anybody by backing this thing up. Well, I'm not even gonna charge you for a permit. I said, all of this, I said, are you gonna, now, wait a minute, these guys, you gotta give me something. You gotta put it in writing because your construction crew won't even start working until they see a permit. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I said, give me something. I don't care what you give me, a permission to work. I really don't care. So he wrote me a letter and sent it. And then I called the construction guy and said, hey, I got this letter, here it is, what do you want to do? 2 days later, the project was done. But the point was, and then he told me they were gonna fill up, put in riprap to keep erosion away. I ultimately had to go get my own riprap and fill the ditch with riprap so the water wouldn't wash it. We'd had a Grand Canyon out here in Orangevale, and so anyway, then we had to build a bridge because the bridge washed out. And I thought, oh God, I'm not even gonna call for a permit because that's going across the water. So I went down to, I'm chairman of the board of directors of the Fair Oaks Cemetery District. And I went over there to the guys and I said, hey, we don't have any bridges here at the cemetery anyplace, do we? You know how to build a bridge? The manager said, yeah, I can build a bridge. So he came out and I showed him what I wanted. My God, we got a bridge down there now. The other one used to take about 16 inches worth of water through a culvert. Now I got 7 feet of water space for water to flow. And so one of our Grange members at a meeting one night, he said, I want to put a name to that bridge. We're going to call that the Bob Clouse Honorary Bridge. I said, wait a minute, I'm still alive? What do you mean? Anyway, so I guess maybe they'll call that the Bob Clouse. I don't know. I just figured if we're going to do the project, like 50 years ago, if somebody knew we had water draining, we should have had that project done a long time ago. Well, now, guess what? I even took charge of putting the water out to the garden, and I've shown it so nobody can damage. It goes up over the road through a 6-inch well drilling rig pipe, well casing. I knew a farmer. I said, do you got any pipe out your place? Out in Pleasant Grove. And I knew he also did well drilling. So anyway, he gave me 2 10-foot sticks. So he said, I'm not going to charge you for them, just take them. That's well casing, 6-inch well casing. So I've got my 2-inch PVC pipe comes up and across the creek and the road and then back down and out to the garden. Nobody's going to mess with that. And if you hit that well casing, because it's buried in 2 feet of concrete, you're going to hurt your car and not hurt that thing at all. And so every time I do something here at this Grange, I want to make sure my great-grandkids don't have to redo it.
What happened when the floods were here a few years ago?
That's when it took the bridge.
Oh.
And we just got this bridge fixed last summer. This is the brand new bridge. This now, you can't get enough water through here to wash it away. I came over and looked at it because it's 7 feet from one concrete to the other. And the bridge planking is 4 by 12s. Well, you can't put the cemetery dump truck can haul a load of dirt across it and it's only 10 feet apart, the concrete. So you can't put enough weight on that 4-inch board in the short span, because by the time the front axle is off the bridge, the back axle is just coming on. And so you're never gonna get the weight of the whole dump truck on there at one time. And, and then it's concrete pillars on both ends.
Is that where the vendors park when they do the summer shows?
Yeah, we've been parking them some of them across the creek. Because then that opens up the parking lot. You know, we do we park cars here for Dovewood Court at Christmas time. So I was getting tired of walking in mud down here when we were parking cars. So now we've put in a huge light across the parking lot. We light up this whole thing and we can park 20 cars on gravel now down here behind the house. And that's before if we need to, we can open the gate and run them down below too, but we don't want to do that because those people, you know, they leave their cars here maybe they're here for 40 minutes while they walk up and walk through Dovewood Court and then come back. And but we can get a lot of cars in here during that period of time.
Did that light get fixed down by the stage?
Mm-hmm. It's all fixed. In fact, we're going to put the same type of illumination down there that we got on this one out here now. I forget how many 1,000-watt that is, but it can light up this whole area. So whatever and I said, well, while we're doing it, let's bury another line across here while we got it open. And so we are going to, probably sometime this summer, we'll complete that little project. But there are times when, especially when we rent the hall, allow the hall to be used for memorial services when somebody dies. Every once in a while, somebody will say, do you have RV storage or RV parking? No. You don't have anything there because we got people that can that'll show up if they can bring their motorhome. So I finally decided we're going to have availability for probably 4 RV parks out here. But if they've rented the hall for something, they'll be able to bring an RV and hook up.
Dry?
And then we'll probably charge them like $25 a night for that, because
Is it dry or do they have utilities?
right, we'll have water and electricity. That's what we run. We've got it run across the parking lot, and now all we have to do is build the spots and run to it. So I thought, well, we had the trench dug open, let's do it only one time. And so that's what we did.
Did you happen to fix the Wi-Fi that was on the hall?
I don't know anything about that,
Okay.
but I know it was out for a while when the electricity was off around. There was a problem with the Wi-Fi, but was it wrong? Was it not working?
It was working, but it was pathetic at best.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I came in and tested it with somebody who said she was part of the Grange.
Okay.
Because I wanted to have an event there and use your internet, but it was unusable.
Oh, I'll have to check on that. Was that recently?
It was a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, because it It was used just 2 weeks ago, I know that. When the Orangevale thing was here, somebody was hooked into it, I think.
Okay.
But to the best of my knowledge, because that's not my game, I leave that to somebody else, but I know that since the first of the year, somebody's used it. And I never heard any complaints, so.
When did you say this Grange was built, in 21?
I think this Grange was built in 52, this building. See, the original Grange, as I understand it, was at the corner of Hazel and Greenback, up there in the, about where the chamber office is, up on that hillside. And it was, in fact, the Grange had a supply store there too. They had storage tanks they delivered fuel oil to farmers out here, and that's where they stored some of their fuel oil. Well, then there was a guy by the name of Binning who ran that, and he was also a Grange member here in the Grange. And his kid was on the volunteer fire department, and he torched the building one night.
We heard about that.
We know him.
And so then at that time, they somehow acquired this 10 acres. And then they split half of it off because they didn't need 10 acres, so they split half off. And I don't know whether they sold it to the church or gave it to the church, or anyway, that 5 acres that they sit on used to be owned by the Grange. And then in the 50s, they dedicated this building, built this building. And this house was already here, and we used, they before me, used this for the caretaker. Caretaker used to live here, and then he or she, generally it was an older couple, and they would live here, and then they would show the hall and rent the hall. And then there was, a few years ago, there was a group of people joined the Grange. They called themselves the Vampires, and secretary, the guy who lived here would take cash for rentals. Well, maybe the Grange saw the cash and maybe they didn't. And anyway, it's best before before Fair Oaks came over and joined them, as best we could determine when we audited the books, they got away with 50 grand, probably a little over 50,000 bucks. And then the gal moved to Oklahoma to get the heck away from here. In fact, she put a word out she was going to get me. She was going to have me done away with, because I was the one that said there's got to be something wrong. And so I had a deputy sheriff walk into my office one day up here on Greenback, and he said, "Bob, you have a weapon permit?" I said, "No." He said, "I want you to start carrying anyway." I said, "What?" He said, "What is her name?" He said, "Spell it for me." So I did, because he said, "If anything happens to you, your wife, or any one of your kids, I want to know who I'm going after. And you have my assurance, I'll get her." And so I said, I started bringing a gun to the office in a carrying case. So he stopped at the office one day. He said, "Bob, you got that gun?" I said, "Yeah." "Can I see it?" "Yeah." So I threw out this little satchel for him. He reached in and got the gun, but the clip wasn't in it. He said, "What the hell are you doing this for?" "I want that clip in it." And he shoved that clip in and slammed it in. And he said, "You leave that clip in there." He said, "If she walks in this door, you ain't gonna have time to put that clip in." Oh. This is Deputy Sheriff, Sacramento County, telling me this. And that was all because of this gal that was here. And so, so the State Grange closed Orangevale Grange up for a while. Then after we came over, Fair Oaks came over, then they gave us the charter back. And then, see, we sold Fair Oaks Grange at that time, set at the end of Bannister Road, and that building was torn down piece by piece and brought down and put on a foundation. It was the old theater from Camp Beale, movie theater, and it still had the holes in the wall and we found two movie projectors from the projection room and a roll of tickets that we gave to the Fair Oaks Historical Society. And when we sold the building for, at that time, I'm going to say just a hair under $400,000. And according to the bylaws of our Grange, we could keep $10,000 and the rest has to go into a trust fund at the State Grange Convention, or at the State Grange headquarters. And then we have to, it's our money, but we have to spend it on the Grange stuff. So we brought $10,000 with us when we came over. Orangevale had loans against the property of about 60 grand. So we paid off that loan with that money. We remodeled the bathrooms, made them ADA accessible. We rebuilt the kitchen, made it so it would be considered a certified kitchen. We put a brand new roof on the building. And the last of the money, it did me good. That was probably one of the best days of my Grange life, because we had some leadership in the State Grange that I didn't trust with our money. And so we wrote them a letter telling them that we were going to repave the parking lot and we needed this much money to pay, and the bill to pave the parking lot was more than what we had left. So can you please send us our final payment of our trust? And that paid for the asphalt, and then we paid a little more and got it done. So we invested almost that whole $400,000 that we got from the sale of Fair Oaks into this property. But we felt it was well worth it. We rebuilt this place at the same time and just put it all in that, so that we think, in fact, when we had it, then we paid for a $10,000 survey, because years ago, there was a piece of property landlocked right back here between us and the neighbors next door. So the Grange property, the 5 acres is like so. Well, then there's 6/10 of an acre on a piece of property like so. This property was landlocked. Well, the Grangers at that time got it for tax money. So I don't know why we needed that 6/10 of an acre, because it's really a bastard piece of property to us. I mean, we can't do anything on it, but we wanted it surveyed because we were told by a couple of the old timers that those people's property is on our property. And so what I did after we got the survey, and I never went out there and looked, I just saw it all on paper. We bought the donuts and the coffee and had a meeting. We invited every one of those people along that street to come to have a cup of coffee with us. Only one of them did. And we were going to suggest that we take their property, and we'll donate you this property. All you got to do is go to the county and make the filing. We'll donate that. We'll donate this and add these to your properties. And they also, one of them said, I own everything on mine. I don't, back to my fence. So I went out there and this is, I found this spot because there's a fence right along there and a power pole. And it goes down 73 feet and over 100 and some feet, and then like so. They're right, their fences are on that property line. So we were wrong in saying you're encroaching on our property. So, but we were still offering we only need this 5 acres. We don't need that 6/10. You want to lengthen your property 70 some feet? You can have it. All you gotta do is you go down and make a filing with the county. They don't want to do it. So we'll pay that $20-some a year taxes on the property just because, you know, I don't know what we'll ever do with it. Because we're certainly not gonna change the fence line any. And we gotta take the trees off of it when they fall and that sort of thing, but that's all right. And one tree fell and so we told the neighbor lady, she's a nice old gal, so we just replaced it ourselves. We weren't even gonna charge her for half of 8 feet of board, you know. We can just do it. So those are, you know, so that's a little bit of history of this place, and other than that, we just think it's, well, the guy, the engineer at that time, he said, Bob, you know what your property is worth? And I said, I have no idea. And I don't really care to know, because as long as we're here, it's going to be at Grange. He said, this property right now, you get $5 million for it. I said, don't tell the tax man that, okay? So anyway, I don't know what it's worth, but the one guy back here called me one night, and I don't know how they can get my home phone, but they did. And he said, hey, Bob, I just want to know what's going on back there. Are you guys getting ready? We had tractors working on the garden, and we had dump trucks and bringing stuff in. And he said, and we put a shed up for the garden, for the wheelbarrow and that kind of stuff. And it's all in a fenced-in area. And he said, are you getting ready to sell that or subdivide it? And I said, as long as I'm breathing air, you don't ever have to worry about this being subdivided. He said, I was afraid you were going to start putting old people's homes or something in back here. Multi-family marketing. I said, nope. Nope. I said, you want to do a garden spot? You got a place to garden if you want. And I said, it's going to remain just as it is. And so, do I know? I have no idea what it's worth. We got 2 hives of bees down there now, so the bees can help pollinate the garden. We're trying to make this. We offered this property to the FFA chapter years ago to do some horticulture. Jim Tissue didn't want it back then, and since then, Ronnie Hollitz didn't want them when he was FFA advisor, and nobody else wants it. We offered it to the Park District to run day camps here. They didn't want it. So I said, well, let's build a garden. Let's do a garden spot. Now that the garden is going, everybody wants to do something over here for us. I'm going to go to the next door neighbor now, probably yet this afternoon, and offer to let him run his sheep over here, mow the grass. We did that before we started building the garden. They ran their sheep, and he had 2 horses, little horses at the time, and they cleaned the stuff down pretty good. Besides that, we get a little bit of fertilizer from 'em, not much, but some.
No, it's, having a garden here is just another treasure for Orangevale.
Well, and I couldn't believe Jim, one of our members, he filled out another grant form for a tractor. He said, Bob, we gotta go spend $15,000. We got a $15,000 grant to buy a Kubota tractor. He wants that one with a bucket on it so he can haul dirt and scrape dirt. I didn't want to even mess with another tractor over here because Blackberry Dave, all I have to do is call him and say, I need this and this. I need a backhoe. I need a blade. I need a bucket. He charges us one time. He discs the whole thing before we had the fences in because it's a fire hazard if we don't. Charges $100 to disc it. He don't even pay for his fuel when he comes over here to help us. You know, so why buy a tractor? And I said to Jim, who's going to change the oil in that tractor? Who's going to buy the fuel to put in it? Who's going to take it down for service when it needs to be serviced? Who's going to fix that hydraulic hose when it breaks? You know, that's the trouble with an organization like us owning something like that. As president here, I can do it because I was raised on the farm and I can easily do it, but I'm not going to. So somebody else is going to have to do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you're entirely welcome. We've kind of covered a lot of,
Yeah, a lot of ground.
yeah.
It's been good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.